Peace and greetings, everybody. This is Sylvester Moore Ill, Tex Masan from thctrust.org. As always, if you want to support what we're doing, start a subscription, which is $32 per month, or you can make a one-time contribution for an indefinite subscription to the website, which includes access to everything in the website and all the templates and all the tutorials and things that I would work on. And I also give you priority response when it comes to answering your questions to the best that I can. Also remember, even with today's research that I'm presenting to you, this is just research. I'm not the guru. I'm not trying to, I stand behind my research by far because I'm pointing you directly to the references. But sometimes you guys think that like I know everything, and what I try to encourage people to do is I direct you to the references. I'm not going to make a decision for you. In some circumstances I might tell you what I do or what I might do, but at the end of the day, I usually don't ask people to make decisions for me. I would look at the reference material, digest it for myself, and make a determination. But I want to make this video because I've heard a lot of people believe that commercial liens don't work. They ignore them, or maybe you've tried to do a commercial lien and you've never had any real success at all. Well, I guess the first thing I'll say is that the goal is enforcement or protection of your right or something like that. So the goal is not necessarily to lien somebody, but obviously we know that if they don't perform according to how they're supposed to, according to their official duties or whatever, it can result in a lien. So in a successful scenario, you don't file a lien, you send a couple of notices, and they take the opportunity to cure. Right? Now, before I get started, I'm not going to go through administrative procedure, affidavits of commercial obligation, commercial liens, notices, and things like that. I'm trying to add a layer onto that research to show people perhaps why their commercial affidavits weren't, why they didn't get any results from them. And I want to try to attempt to show some things that I've learned in my research of how you should construct a commercial affidavit to make sure that is attachable and enforceable, and that you could actually well, in the case that I'm going to discuss later on, is in the case of dealing with a public official, how to use the affidavit of commercial obligation to perfect a commercial lien against the proceeds of their bond, basically. So I've been, and I haven't done this. I've attempted to do it probably in 2012, a long time ago. And I wasn't successful, and I didn't really have much research on the subject matter. I understood when I wasn't successful why, because there was still like a lot of things that I didn't know. But I continued like everything else: trust, secured party creditor, the indemnity bond, all these different topics that have been out here. I continued to study them even as I'm still studying them now. So when I study this stuff over the years, I keep notes, and I keep notes of where my information is about the public hazard bond or the fidelity bond or commercial liens and things like that. But first, you have to go get the foundational information. So I encourage you to visit www.thctrust.org. There's 2 videos on there, at least 2 videos. There's probably like 3 or 4 videos, really. And you want to click the menu that says Administrative Procedure, and you want to watch the videos that are about administrative procedure. And then there's a video in there about commercial liens. You definitely want to watch those videos. And when you go to the website, and this is the free side of the website, by the way, all you have to do is sign up, and that's thctrust.org. So yeah, when you go to the website, those videos would be under the link that says administrative procedure. And not only the page where the videos are on, there's articles written there, obviously. For example, what I'm covering today, I'm actually just kind of going over an article that I'm kind of writing for the website right now. And but when you get there, like you're on the website, if you see anything bold, click it. If you see something underlined, click it, because it might be a link or it might be a PDF for you to download and read. So this is an example of an oath of office. And I'm going to say a few things that's basic that I know you guys already know. But you can't take office without having an oath of office. This is to make sure that you're going to follow the law because you are empowered. You are put in a position of authority, whether you're a treasurer, tax assessor, judge, clerk of a court, secretary of state, legislator. You have these, you know, so you're in this office of trust, and therefore you have to give an oath. The oath is really for the people because it's your public pledge to support and defend the laws of the United States, which is the federal constitution and the state constitution. It's kind of basic. Public officer and employee includes every officer and employee of the state, including the University of California, every county, city, and county, every county, city and county, district, and authority, including any department, division, bureau, board, commission, agency, or instrumentality of the foregoing. So you always have a government officer who is taking a constitutional oath, who is over some matter of commerce or whatever. You know, there's just always that person, and that's the person who you need to deal with when there's an issue. You don't need to deal with the employee. You need to deal with the person who takes an oath of office, right? So that's going to be like a sheriff, or it's going to be a deputy sheriff, a clerk, or a deputy clerk, right? Now, let's read, and I'm going to point out, this is how I'm going to show you that this oath is connected to their bond, the actual insurance policy. Now, if you wanted to actually get a copy of what the bond or insurance policy looks like, you can use a FOIA request. You can use a FOIA request and a FOIA request to your county treasurer or the county administrator. You got to do the research to figure out where to send it. A lot of that comes from reading the state code and seeing how they got the offices and everything set up. But just get it started. If you're in doubt, send it to 2 places. So you can get that to study it, to see what it looks like. And actually, you're going to want to do that because once you perfect the affidavit of commercial obligation on their fidelity bond, if you perfect that, then you're going to have an interest in the proceeds under the bond. So you're going to have to know the bond so you can get the policy number. Because the policy number, only after perfecting the security interest, and we'll walk down how that's done, but the policy number will be what you actually file the UCC financing statement on, right? But as with anything, you have to follow a procedure. And where would we get the procedure from? The Uniform Commercial Code. And I honestly feel like the reason why a lot of people's quote unquote so-called commercial liens weren't having effect, and they're probably a good thing that they didn't, because a lot of them were done out of anger and not really done the right way. These things are supposed to be done without emotion. It's really just clean, pure process, dealing with the truth and to some degree dealing with the facts. So, but what I was saying is the reason I think a lot of this didn't go anywhere, because we're dealing with law and equity. So we got the administrative procedure presenting the claim under the common law with the procedure, but the part that I've been diving into is the UCC, because when you have a contract that you have a security interest in property or collateral or different things, the Uniform Commercial Code is what the court looks at to determine whether you are, what type of interest you have as a creditor in that contract. So I started looking at, so then it made me have to rethink the contract, because we know when we're dealing in equity as well as these maritime courts, because remember, there's common law jurisdiction, the equity, and then we have the admiralty maritime thing. So we're dealing with this equity in maritime courts. We're dealing with commercial instruments. So although it's an affidavit, we're really more or less dealing with it as a bill, right? Because we're dealing with, you know, so I say that to say this. Basically, it meant I went to the Uniform Commercial Code and it made me have to rethink the actual contract. That's where I was going. Because in admiralty and maritime law, as well as in these courts of equity, the first thing they want to see is the contract or the international maritime contract. So, but I'm going to show you later the contract. So basically what I'm trying to get to is ultimately we're going to put an acceptance on the oath of office, which is collateral. And when I say we're going to put an acceptance on the oath of office, which is collateral, we're going to do everything a certain way so that when the affidavit of commercial obligation is perfected, everything lines up with the Uniform Commercial Code. But when you put the acceptance on a certified copy of the oath of office, it becomes chattel paper. And your possession of that chattel paper and your acceptance upon it, once you give them notice, you've created a security agreement in certain goods. Those goods is actually chattel paper. So that security agreement is your contract. It's where your interest comes into play, because now you have a security interest in collateral that's pledged under the Constitution as a contract trust. And ultimately what we're getting at is we had to line every part of the claim and the affidavit up with the Uniform Commercial Code so we can perfect a security interest in collateral and have an attachable and enforceable interest or commercial lien in the proceeds of the collateral. So once again, the collateral being the oath of office and the proceeds being the bond. So let me read this oath of office and just point out a couple things. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I, whoever do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. Okay, did you hear that? Faith and allegiance. So they said they will bear true faith and allegiance. That's like almost obedience, allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely without any mental reservations or the purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Okay, that's the part. So I wanted to point that out, and then I want to go to, if you want to follow along, you can go to California Government Code section 1501. And what this says is the condition of the official bond, right? The condition of the official bond shall be that the principal, this would be like a public fiduciary, will well, truly, and faithfully perform all official duties when required of him by law, and also all such additional duties as may be imposed on him by any existing law of the state or law enacted subsequently to the execution of the bond. So the first thing I want to point out is you see the same verbiage. It says the condition of the bond is that the principal will well, truly, and faithfully perform. Didn't we just see that? And this is in the oath. I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Right? So there's the oath, which is a pledge. And this is the UCC connection, right? Because when you hear, okay, it's the oath of office, right? But in commerce, it's a pledge. And pledge, it means what? It's consideration. So when you accept someone's oath of office, you accept valid consideration. And that constitutes the binding agreement for the formation of the contract trust, known as the Constitution, that secures for you a security interest in collateral, known as the oath of office. The chattel paper itself as a security, and this is why when you do this acceptance, you got to go get a certified copy of the oath of office, and you or certified, or the copy from the clerk of the court with the seal on it, and you can do your own notice of acceptance and attach it to it, and then put the acceptance in writing and send it back to the party affected by the acceptance, whether it be the secretary, clerk, or sheriff, or whoever it is. So you put that acceptance in there. Now you're binding them into their constitutional obligations. So we want to make sure that our contract lines up with the Uniform Commercial Code, because that is the contract that they're using to figure out what type of rights or interests a creditor has in specific property. So that being said, once again, let's look up these terms real quick so you can see it for yourself. We looked up the oath of office, right? In the oath, it's a pledge. So let's look up the definition of pledge real quick. A solemn promise or undertaking, right? That undertaking is important because an undertaking is an obligation. Let's look up the term oath definition. When you hear obligation, you're thinking of duties supported by collateral, which is basically like a bond. So now we have the definition of oath. It's almost the same definition as a pledge. It's a solemn promise, often invoking a divine witness regarding one's future action. So that's an obligation, a performance-based obligation, a future action or behavior. A behavior is to, how a behavior is to either take an action or prevent something from occurring, to support and defend the Constitution. That is a behavior, right? So all of this ties into our constitutional rights. Again, this is why you want to accept this oath as chattel paper. Let's look at the definition of, let's see, the chattel paper. I already have the things in here. The UCC defines chattel paper as a record or records that evidence both a monetary obligation and a security interest in specific goods, or a lease of specific goods. So I'm going to show you how the oath of office, that evidence is both a monetary obligation and a security interest in specific goods. What is the specific goods that the oath of office gives us a security interest in? Those specific goods would be performance, the performance of the public fiduciary. What is the evidence of the monetary obligation, right? When you get those two together, see, the performance-based part is in the oath. The obligation part is in the condition of the bond, which is what was in California Government Code Section 1500. We looked at it earlier in the last video. So those two things together is pretty much chattel paper. And I'll show you later when we start looking at the affidavit of commercial obligation and how it's laid out. We will look at chattel paper under the Uniform Commercial Code, and it's going to show us that taking possession of the chattel paper gives you a security interest in that property, right? So that means when you accept the oath of office and you take possession of the certified copy of it and you give them notice of that's what you did, you've taken a security interest in that pledge. And what that means is you've completed the elements necessary to form a binding contract. So now you have an enforceable contract should you need to enforce it. When you accept the oath of office, this comes before the affidavit of commercial obligation. Because this is the time when there's still time to cure or to resolve the particular matter, but things are getting serious. But if it proceeds beyond that and you don't get the remedy and someone's violating your rights, then you might proceed with the affidavit of commercial obligation, because that's when it's already done. You're about to charge them, but before you can give somebody a charge, you need to have some underlying contract. So this chattel paper records is the contract, your acceptance on an oath of office, and the terms and the conditions of that contract support and defend the Constitution. Uh, they've given allegiance. That's a performance-based duty and an obligation. And you're one of the people. The Constitution is for the people, by the people. And again, once we get to that part, we're going to look in the UCC and see what it says about that particular type of security interest. But I'll pretty much paraphrase right now before we look at it. And it's basically saying, by you taking possession in this chattel paper, you have a security interest. Now, should you have to go charge with the affidavit of commercial obligation, that security interest may turn into a perfected security interest. And at that time, what happens is you've perfected a security interest in the collateral. So, the collateral, again, is the oath itself. But let's look at what the proceeds are, right? So let's look at this definition real quick. There's a whole bunch of helicopter and plane activities and things going on right now over me. So here we go. Proceeds is money obtained from an event or activity. Now we know there's no real money, but we're not also looking at a law dictionary. We're looking at Google. So in this whole transaction of an oath of an office, which is a pledge or offer, right? That's an activity. That's an event. Where's the money obtained from it? That is the bond that's pledged in collateral. And we know that because of, as we looked at the condition of the bond. Let's look at it one more time. California Civil Code, what was it? No, it was California Government Code 1500, condition of the bond. I think that's what it was. Right? When we just looked at collateral, right? This is the monetary obligation. An official bond shall be made payable to the state of California, all of that. And here's the condition of the bond: that the principal well, truly, faithfully perform. So that's the monetary obligation. That's the monetary part. The obligation is the Constitution. This is why you know you can have your constitutional rights enforced. And when you're dealing with maritime and commercial courts, you have to have the contract. So there you have the contract. If somebody did this step by step, you would at minimal remove somebody from their office if what you were doing was credible, right? Because this is like a double-edged sword. I always say it's like having a concealed weapons permit. If you take somebody's life, you must be able to prove that you were doing it in self-defense or that you was within your lawful means. Because if not, the fullest penalty of the law is going to come down upon you. So it's the same like this. If you do this the correct way, you follow the proper procedure, which is laid out in the Uniform Commercial Code, which is what we're looking at right now, then and you know how to register your claim, because that's one of the other things. We will get to that later on down the road, but you have to know how to register this claim so it can take proper effect. Then, but if you do that, then there's really nothing that they can do about it but suffer the consequences. So this is the way that you enforce your constitutional right. But anyways, just follow along with this series, I guess. The next, we're going to look at the Affidavit of Commercial Obligation, and we're going to also look at the Uniform Commercial Code. So we're going to look at some of these things like collateral and proceeds. We're going to look at them in the Uniform Commercial Code, see what it says about it. And we're going to look at the Affidavit of Commercial Obligation, because that's actually going to be the proceedings that has to happen in order to attach and have an enforceable interest in the collateral. So again, the prerequisites is go to thctrust.org, watch the administrative procedure and commercial lien stuff, and read through the articles that deal with that part of it. Look at the notary certificates and everything, because the next video is going to assume that you know all of that already, and I'm just going to deal with the affidavit of commercial obligation, the critical parts of it, as relate to perfecting a claim against a public official surety bond. Thank you. Please subscribe. Set up a membership at thctrust.org. In addition to setting up a membership, you can also join the mailing list over there.